Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? I'm going to go live here. We'll start answering questions in a couple minutes. If any of you guys have questions about dirt bike carb, jetting, troubleshooting, fuel related questions, you can leave them in the chat. And I have a list that I'm going to go through. But if you have a question, you can leave it in the chat and I'll get to it if I have time. All right. It's 9:59. We'll give it another minute or so, and then I'll start answering your questions. All right, it is 10 o'clock. So before I get started, I'm Kelly from Motocross Hideout. I wanted to, really my goal is to help trail riders and beginners kind of get into the sport safely, but my carb related videos kind of started taking off, and I never really considered myself an expert, but I guess the way that I was teaching was making sense to people. So I kind of just kept going that route, and people kept asking me questions, and I just explained how I tune and troubleshoot my bikes. So I guess it made sense. So that's why I'm doing this. So if you have any questions on the stuff that I'm answering, you can leave a comment below. Looks like we got a comment already. Appreciate your work so much. Thanks for doing this. Yeah, you're welcome. I just want to help people get their bike running right, because not only is it frustrating when you have a bike that doesn't run well, it can be dangerous if you have a bike that has poor throttle response, it's bogging, sputtering. So I hate it when I have a bike that is not running very well. And if my volume is not high enough, please let me know in the comments. So the first question that I'm going to answer is, what do you do when jetting has little or no effect on the symptom? So let's say you got bogging, or a bike is hard to start, and you're trying to change the jetting, whether it's with pilot jet, main jet, needle, whatever it is, and it has little or no effect. Well, the first thing I would do is first I'd ask, is this symptom a new problem or not? So if it's a new problem, then I would ask myself, when did it change? Did I do something on the bike that caused this problem or made it start happening? Maybe I was doing maintenance on it or whatever it was. But if I'm changing the jets and it's making little or no effect, to me, that it likely is either you're not making a big enough change on the jetting. So maybe you are adjusting the air screw or fuel screw, or maybe you went half a turn, one turn, and it didn't seem to make much effect or any at all. Well, try going with a bigger change and see if that makes it better or worse. And if that's not making any effect at all, then it might be just that you're changing the wrong jet or uh, um, wrong part of the carburetor. So let's say you're adjusting the air screw, fuel screw, or pilot jet, but it's not doing anything. Well, depending on the symptom, it may be another part of the carb, like the needle or the main jet. Does that make sense? All right. Question number 2 is, I'm using non-ethanol gas mixed at 70 to 1. So 2-stroke dirt bike with Motorex 2-stroke oil. in their gas trials bike and considering trying VP trials motorcycle fuel. Would I need to rejet? So I would say that you really want to tune or jet your dirt bike based on the fuel and premix ratio that you're using. And you never want to substitute your premix ratio for jetting. So let's say you think your two-stroke is running too rich, you don't want to adjust how much oil, the oil mix ratio you're using based on if it's rich or lean, because you want to use the right premix ratio based on how you ride. So generally, the higher the RPM you ride, the more oil you're going to want to use in your mix ratio. So let's say you're riding a 85 or 125 two-stroke and you're riding at high RPM most of the time, you're probably going to want to run 32 to 1, if not more oil. Whereas if you're on like a 250 or 300 two-stroke and you're trail riding at lower RPM, you can get away with 40 or 50 to 1 without causing any problems, because the engine's not getting hot enough to burn all that oil away. You don't need to use as much. And like this trials bike, they recommend running a lower oil mix ratio. So going back to the question, would I need to rejet, changing to VP trials motorcycle fuel? And I would say it depends on mainly if the octane rating is changing, because let's say you're running 91 octane, it's tuned perfectly for that, starts easy, runs great. And I don't know what octane rating this trials motorcycle fuel is for, but if it's higher octane or maybe even lower octane, you will probably want to change the jetting on it, because let's say you're using 91 and this VP fuel is like 100, 105, 110, that higher octane. The way I understand it, it doesn't burn as quickly. It's more resistant to detonation, which is better for high compression engines. But since it burns slower, it's going to run richer than that 91 octane. So you're going to want to go a little bit leaner on your jetting if it's higher octane. But if it's the same octane as you're already using and it's tuned good, then I don't think you would need to rejet it at all. All right, we've got a couple of questions here. How does one measure a throttle cable? Uh, so I don't think I'm not sure I fully understand the question of measuring a throttle cable, because if it's the right cable for your bike, then all you have to do is adjust it, whether it's at the throttle grip end or towards the carb end. You just want to adjust it so that there's just barely enough slack. So when you twist the throttle, there's a little bit of wiggle right there. And then it starts opening the throttle, because if you have too much slack, you're going to be twisting the throttle a fair amount before it even starts opening the throttle. And if there's no slack, then the throttle is always going to be open a little bit, which you don't want. It's going to be hard to get the proper idle, and the bike is going to want to accelerate when you turn off the throttle. Does that answer your question? All right, let's see here. Going on to next question. Dirt bike won't run unless you give it quarter turn throttle. So I'm guessing they start it up and the engine just dies unless you give it at least a quarter turn throttle. So this likely means that it's not getting enough fuel and or air. So I'm guessing it's a bike that's been sitting for a while. It probably needs choke. So if you need to turn the throttle just to keep it going, it's likely going to be a pilot jet issue. And if it's been sitting for a while, pilot jet is probably clogged up because especially pump gas, it's not very good quality. It breaks down, it clogs up jets and passages really easily. So if your dirt bike isn't running unless you have to give it gas, it's either a dirty pilot jet or possibly the idle screw or the idle adjustment is just too low. But most likely it's going to be in the pilot jet circuit. Mm, excuse me. All right. Another question from Wallack in the comments here. I got a 2004 Suzuki LTZ 400. That'd be a four-wheeler with a Leo vent exhaust, Canon air filter. Haven't changed anything on the carb except air fuel screw. A problem is that it's currently, when cutting off, there's a little backfire from the exhaust. And when riding harder, I have backfire. Does this take away a lot of power? It's very harmful because the problem is that my carburetor doesn't have grooves on the needle. Okay, so the needle doesn't have adjustment. What do you think about replacing the spark plug with an iridium? So a couple questions here. So it sounds like backfiring when cutting off. I'm guessing they're saying that when they let off the throttle, it's backfiring. And so on a four-stroke, it's pretty typical to have backfiring on deceleration. So you roll off the throttle, you're slowing down, it'll pop, 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 pop. A little bit of backfire is normal for a four-stroke when decelerating because you're shutting off the throttle and it's still at a higher RPM. So it's trying to suck in air and fuel and it's running a little bit lean. So a little bit of popping is normal, but if it's excessive or it's really loud banging, then that's likely it's jetted too lean or perhaps there's an air leak. So if it's excessive, I would keep going richer on that fuel screw adjustment. And as long as it keeps getting better, I would keep going that way. But a little bit of popping is normal on a four-stroke. And then replacing a spark plug with an iridium. Honestly, I don't have enough experience to give an educated answer on this. Unfortunately, I pretty much always use just a standard NGK spark plug and in 2 and 4 strokes because they're cheaper and they work. They're reliable. I mean, maybe you can, I don't know if you're looking for more power or what, maybe it'll last longer, but I've had no problems with cheap NGK spark plugs for 3, 5, $10. So go ahead and try it. Let us know what you think. They're not cheap. All right. And yeah, if you have any questions on my answers or if you want another question, just leave it in the comments. All right, next question we got is how to set the main jet on an RM85 two-stroke dirt bike. So typically, I don't even mess with the main jet until I have the pilot jet and probably the needle adjusted properly because those are the most important for starting, idling, and lower RPM throttle response. I usually don't even touch the main jet until I know the rest of the bike runs well. So the main jet is primarily for wide open throttle, throttle response, and power. So to set the main jet, you want to start with a clean spark plug, a new one, just so you know that it's not fouled. And you want to warm the bike up, get it fully warmed up because if you go full throttle when it's cold, you're more likely to cold seize it. But also the air fuel ratio or the mixture is going to change as the engine warms up. Excuse me. So get your engine fully warmed up. Make sure the radiator's nice and hot. The engine's nice and hot. It has good throttle response or the best it can. Maybe it doesn't have good throttle response if the jetting isn't tuned. But then to set the main jet, I like to get into a higher gear, third, fourth, fifth gear, and find a smooth, open, flat road, preferably uphill, because to more easily identify a jetting symptom, you want to put a bigger load on the engine. So when you go uphill or when you're like riding in sand, it's going to put a bigger load on the engine. It's going to have to work harder, and that's going to make the symptom more pronounced and easier to hear and feel. So get up into that third, fourth gear. Make sure you have enough room for this in a safe spot, and then roll on and hold the throttle wide open and let the bike rev out. And depending on what the symptom or the sound is, I will adjust the main jet based on that. So you rev it out, and let's say it sputters. So when you're holding the throttle wide open, that sputtering is going to means that the jetting is too rich on the main jet, and you want to go down. So uh, I know a lot of people are nervous about going too lean on the jetting. So if you're unsure if it's too lean or not, you can keep going richer on the jetting until it sputters. And then if it's sputtering, you want to go down, uh, just to be on the safe side, just go down one size on the main jet until that sputtering goes away. So I don't know what the main jet size is on an RM85. Let's say it's a 185 main jet. So if it's sputtering at wide open throttle, go down one size to a 180. And if it's better, but it's still sputtering a little bit, then go down another size to like a 175. And if the sputtering is gone, well, then it's better. It's going to have better throttle response and power, and it's not going to be too lean. You could probably go down on the size a little bit more without being too lean. But if it is too lean, it's either going to bog or it's going to be lacking power. So you get up in that power band, get on the pipe, and it's going to go flat generally when it's too lean. It'll rev out, but it just won't have as much power if it were jetted properly on that main jet. All right, we got a couple more comments from Waleed. Just purchased a 2005 CRF 450R, runs a little rough, and it all points to carb issues, has FMF exhaust, slip on, wondering when rebuilding the carbs, should I size up from the factory specs for jetting? Good question. I would like to know what exactly you mean by it runs rough. So the factory jetting specs, generally, they're a good starting point, a good place to start. Like if someone replaced all the jets with different sizes or you don't know what they are, going back to the stock jets, like for that bike, it might be like a 45 pilot jet and a 165 main. That's a good place to start, but those are just recommended specs, and they're not always going to be best for your specific bike based on the mods as well as the climate, because elevation, temperature, humidity, all that plays a role in how the bike is going to run. So your jetting specs may be a little bit different than someone else's on the other side of the country. So um, running a little rough, I'm guessing they mean that it idles rough. So I always tune based on sounds and symptoms. I use a 3-step sounds and symptoms tuning method that I cover in my 2 and 4-stroke Jetting Made Easy programs. And all I'm really doing is tuning each circuit based on how it sounds and runs. So if I know that the pilot jet or the fuel screw is too lean, then I'm just going to richen it until it gets better. And if it gets better, I keep going that way until it gets worse, and then I back it off. Or if I'm going richer and it's getting worse, well, then I probably went the wrong way, and I'm going to go the other way until it starts getting better. Does that make sense? All right, let's see. Next question. How to transfer a different 2-stroke oil on a dirt bike? Is it okay? So I believe this is referring to the 2-stroke premix oil. Let's say you're using Amsoil Dominator Racing 2-stroke oil, and you want to change to Maxima 2-stroke smokeless oil. Just an example. Is it okay to switch? Well, from my experience, yes, it is, and it's really not that big of a deal. I mean, if you want to do it right, you can drain the carb, drain the tank, and then put all new fresh fuel and oil in. And I would say that, do you need to change the jetting if you're using new oil and fuel? Well, it depends on how much of a change it is. If it's a radically different type of oil, so let's say Amsoil Dominator, that's a racing oil meant for high heat, high RPM, and then you're going to more trail riding, lower RPM oil. It's probably going to run a little bit differently, so you may need to tune the jetting just a little bit based on that, as well as what oil mix ratio that you're using. But is it okay to switch? Yeah, I mean, maybe you run out of oil and you have to use a different one. You only have a certain kind with you. If you're just a casual rider, you're probably not going to notice much difference. So I've done it before. You probably won't notice it. All right, next question here. Two-stroke sputters before max RPM, then power band kicks in. So if you were to sound it out, I'm guessing it'd be like so it probably tries to start accelerate, and then it sputters, and then the power band kicks in and accelerates well. So there's a couple things that come to mind when I hear that. If it's in the mid range, so roughly around half throttle, that usually has to do with the needle jet circuit. And when they say it's sputtering, that usually means that it's too rich. It's getting too much fuel. And if your needle has an adjustable clip position, so if you take the needle out, usually in the throttle slide, there's clips, usually 5, 7, 8 clips where you can take out that clip and put it in a different clip. You want to, if it's running rich, you want to adjust that leaner. And it's a little bit confusing unless you understand how it works. So the clip positions, if you raise the clip, so you go, let's say, from the middle position or the third clip down from the top, if you go up one clip, that would be raising the clip, but also lowering the needle. So a bigger part of the needle taper is covering that needle jet. That's going to be leaner. So I would try going a clip position leaner if it's sputtering, and seeing if that helps it or fixes it. If it helps it, keep going leaner. And if that's still not fixing the problem, there's a chance that the float height may be off. Because I've had it where the float height was too high on 2-stroke or 4-stroke, and it was sputtering mid throttle. All right, it's 10:21. Got about 10 more minutes here. Let me know if you have any other questions. Next one is dirt bike started revving high out of nowhere. How do you fix it? So this is, let's see here. So probably got the throttle off, and the bike just started revving up higher, and that can be very scary because you're just like, what in the world just happened? So first, you want to check that the throttle cable is not binding, because sometimes if you install it wrong or just something weird happens where you turn the handlebars and the throttle cable gets stuck, that'll open the throttle until you turn it back or you shut off the bike. Maybe it's the cable sticking, possibly if like the you tipped over on the right side and dirt got underneath the actual throttle or the throttle grip, that can cause it to stick. You definitely want to take that apart and clean it. Make sure that the throttle cable is operating properly. So give it a few twists of the throttle, make sure it's closing properly. You can usually hear it when the throttle closes. So you just hear it and listen for that tapping noise of the throttle shutting all the way. You may have to take the carb all the way off to make sure that it's actually closing. But if that doesn't fix it, Um, then it could be an air leak causing it, and this usually doesn't happen out of nowhere. It's more than likely one of the first issues, but it could be an air leak due to like a crack in the intake manifold or the air boot. Um, and you can tell pretty quickly if you got the bike running and you just kind of rotate or wiggle the car back and forth. And if the RPM changes, that likely means that the rubber part of the intake is cracked and needs to be replaced. Let's see here. We got another question. Worker B. How does one know if the bike's ignition system is failing? Compare and contrast each and every component and its use for said system. So I don't have as much troubleshooting experience with the ignition system, but generally, if the ignition system is failing, it's probably not going to have as good of spark. So it's going to be running rich. It might be hard to start. It's probably not going to have much power. Um, so I would just start with the easiest thing. Start with a spark plug, replace that. You can test and see if it even has good spark. So you can take the spark plug out of the cylinder head, put it back in the cap or the boot, and then rest it against the cylinder, and then kick it over or spin it over and look for that blue spark. And if it's sparking good, then the spark is probably good enough. But if it's not very strong or not consistent, then you'll have to work your way back from the spark plug, that the boot or the ignition coil. Make sure there's no broken wires or it's falling apart. You can swap out the CDI if there's problems. Otherwise, there's ways to test the stator as well. I'm sure there's other videos on it on YouTube. I honestly don't have as much experience testing that electrical stuff. uh, okay, Spencer said I bought a used two-stroke that was bogging. I found that the throttle cable was too tight, causing a high idle. Yep, that's what can happen. So the previous owner tuned the air screw too. Yeah. Yeah, if the idle's too high and people are trying to adjust something else, that's an easy way to get confused quickly. So yeah, if it's idling high, you want to start with the easiest things first, like the throttle cable. Another question from Worker B: can I use a BR7 in an 89 250R? So referring to a spark plug BR7, I'm guessing a Honda 250R two-stroke. So as far as spark plugs go, the BR7, that would be the 7 refers to the heat range of the spark is the best way to understand it. And I always use whatever the manual recommends for that bike as far as the heat range goes. So if it recommends a BR7, then yeah, use a BR7. But if it recommends a BR8, which is generally what 252 strokes run, going down to a 7 is a higher, yes, a higher heat range. And people often do this to resist plug fouling, like you're fouling spark plugs, and you run a lower number to get a higher heat range to help resist that. I would say that that is a kind of a good band-aid fix for an actual jetting issue. So and because if you run that higher heat range and you're, let's say you're racing or riding at a higher RPM, that might get the engine temperatures too hot for what the bike is intended for. So it's a good way to, like, if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you need to get back to your truck, your spark plug followed, and all you have is a lower heat range. Yeah, that's fine. But I always recommend using what the factory recommends for the heat range and then tuning the carburetor jetting based on that or the symptoms. So if it's running too rich, don't go to a hotter spark plug, tune the jetting so that it runs the best and is the most reliable. Another question from Spencer here. We're almost out of time, but that's all right. I have a YZ125X, but I'm thinking of switching to a WR250F. I mostly ride single track with some steeper sections mixed in. I like my bike, but the jumpy throttle response is a turnoff. So the YZ125X, based on the YZ125 motocross bike, I haven't ridden the 125X, but I'm very familiar with 125 two strokes. So the YZ125 probably has the best bottom end power out of 125s, which still isn't great. So it's still pretty snappy. Um, so comparing it to the WR250F, I would say that it depends on what year WR250F you're referring to, because I know that the newer WR250Fs with the reverse style engine, I believe, which started in 2015, they don't have as much low end torque because they're tuned more for high RPM. The WR250F, the newer ones, honestly, from what it sounds like, they're a little too close to the race bike and how they're tuned and set up. I prefer the older one with the better low end, mid range torque. But in either case, it's probably going to be a little bit smoother and easier to ride than your 125. So the older carbureted WR250Fs are going to have a little more low end, especially compared to your 125. All right. Time's almost out, but I'll answer a couple more questions. And if you would like to get more personalized help from me, if you want one on one coaching or a troubleshooting call to figure out your specific problem, I do offer one on one personalized coaching where you can talk with me, a video chat one on one for an hour to get all your questions asked. I got a link to that. There's a discount on that right now. The link is in the description below, whether you have a 2-stroke or 4-stroke. And if you sign up within the next 24 hours, I'll also include my full step-by-step jetting program. Let's see here. All right, another question. Dirt bike. Oh no, we just answered that one. Let's see. We'll answer this one. CRF 250R bogs if you slap it hard, but then hesitates half throttle. So I'm guessing they're saying that when you whack the throttle open quickly, it bogs. So, and then it hesitates at half throttle. So this could be lean and rich symptoms, but at different points in the RPM range. So a CRF 250R, that's the 250 4-stroke motocross bike. If it has a carburetor, then it's going to have the Kian FCR pumper carb on it. And a pumper carb is simply a carb with an accelerator pump. It's basically when you quickly open the throttle, it's like a little squirt gun that shoots fuel into the engine, because with those race bikes with a lot of power and the big carburetor, they have a lot of potential. They have potential for a lot of horsepower, but when you open the throttle quickly, they tend to bog because they're getting too much air sucked in and not enough fuel. So that accelerator pump shoots that extra fuel to richen the mixture so that it doesn't bog. So when those 4-stroke race bikes bog when you accelerate quickly, it's often because the accelerator pump isn't working properly or at all. So the accelerator pump diaphragm could be worn out. It's just a rubber diaphragm that pushes fuel through the accelerator pump circuit, and then that pushes it up and squirts it through the carburetor to the engine. So if that's clogged, so it's not squirting any fuel, or it's just dribbling out, that needs to be cleaned out or fixed so that the accelerator pump is working properly. Otherwise, if it's still bogging, possibly the pilot jet circuit or the fuel screw needs to be tuned so that it doesn't bog when you open the throttle quickly. With that said, if you're just whacking the throttle open quickly, like in neutral, Pretty much any carbureted dirt bike, especially, is going to bog out if you go from 0 to full throttle as fast as you can in neutral. Pretty much any bike is going to bog out. So you always want to test your symptoms. It's best to test them when you're actually accelerating in gear. But then he says it also hesitates half throttle. So going back to half throttle issues, that's likely going to be the needle jet circuit. So depending on if it's rich or lean, based on the signs and symptoms, or the sounds and symptoms, you want to go richer or leaner on that needle jet circuit. All right, looks like we are past the half an hour mark. Thank you guys for showing up. If you do want to get personalized help from me, I'll keep that link open to my jetting coaching and for the next like 24 hours or so. If you enjoyed this live Q&A session, I'd love to hear back from you. We've got a decent amount of comments. Thank you for showing up. If you have any more questions, if I get enough feedback from this, if people really liked it, maybe I'll do it again next week. So, yeah, I'm Kelly Faker from MX Hideout. Thank you for showing up. I'll leave this live stream up for a little bit. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments or shoot me an email. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you next time. Ride safe. Have fun.